Hey, what's going on? In this video, we'll be discussing subacromial impingement syndrome, so we'll talk about what it actually is, and then also give some exercises that can help with it. I'll leave some timestamps down below, so that way if you want to skip to any portion, go ahead and do that. Give this video a big thumbs up if you want to, it helps the video out. Let's get started. So subacromial impingement syndrome is an incredibly common diagnosis in the shoulder. And it's usually just characterized by pain with overhead movements. And what we used to think that was going on is there was some sort of movement dysfunction in between the shoulder blade and the humerus. And so we have the acromion process here, which is part of the shoulder blade, and then the humerus. And then as we would go into abduction, there would be a lack of upward rotation of the shoulder blade, which would lead to an impingement in between those two structures, leading to some irritation of the subacromial bursa, as well as the supraspinatus tendon. But when we look at some of the other research on the biomechanics, we actually see that there's a lot of variability in the shoulder in between the scapula and that humerus. And we actually see that there's compression in asymptomatic individuals. So those biomechanics don't seem to actually explain subacromial impingement syndrome. Instead of it being an issue between the acromion process and the humerus, what we actually think is going on is that's a rotator cuff tendon issue, specifically the supraspinatus tendon. What we see in those with shoulder pain with overhead movements is that the supraspinatus tendon actually swells up and stays swollen for longer periods of time after activity, and that's what's causing the irritation of the shoulder with overhead movements or really any shoulder movements in general. And so what this means for our rehab process is that we can still do those exercises that can help with the shoulder blade movement, but we actually should probably focus a little bit more on that supraspinatus tendon in our rehab programs. For the supraspinatus tendon, lateral raises are a great place to start. When the tendon is really irritated, we might actually just start off with isometric holds and then build up from there. And what we'll do is we'll take the exercise band or a weight and we'll just bring the arm up to as high as we feel comfortable. So somewhere generally between 45 to 90 degrees. It just depends on how much we can tolerate. And we'll hold this position for 30 to 45 seconds. And so we want this to be challenging enough where we actually feel like we're having some resistance with this, but it's not so hard that we're shaking and we're not able to control it. So we just want to be able to hold this position for 30 to 45 seconds. But for a majority of presentations, I actually feel like we can start at that lateral raise where we're working both the concentric as well as the eccentric muscle contraction. In general, I feel like it's better to incorporate some movement early on in our rehab than it is to load heavier with an isometric contraction. It's just the movement is actually a little bit more helpful. And so when we're doing these, we want to do them over a 4-second muscle contraction. So it's going to be 2 seconds up through that concentric muscle contraction, and then 2 seconds back down through the eccentric muscle contraction. As I was saying before, generalized strengthening of the muscles around the shoulder blade can also be beneficial for those with pain with overhead movements. The 3 main muscles that help with that upper rotation of the shoulder blade are the upper traps, the lower traps, and the serratus anterior muscles. And there are a variety of different exercises that we can use to strengthen each one of those muscles. For the serratus anterior, one of the common exercises is a serratus punch. So we'll take an exercise band and wrap it around us, and we're going to work on protracting the shoulder blades. So we're going to try to move those shoulder blades away from each other. So we'll take the exercise band here, and we're going to punch away, protracting those shoulder blades, and then slowly coming back. And then we'll just repeat this nice and slow here. And then to increase the load, we can obviously just use a heavier exercise band. I like to also use a variety of different push-ups to help strengthen the serratus anterior muscle. So we could do a push-up with a plus as well as the decline push-up. For the push-up with a plus, we'll be in a normal push-up position here. And we're going to push our chest away from the ground, protracting those shoulder blades. And then we can drop our chest down towards the ground again, and then protract. And then that's the serratus push-up here. And then if we want to, we can do a full push-up and then add the plus in as well, if our shoulders are able to tolerate that. And then the decline push-up is exactly what it sounds like. Our feet are going to be elevated, and then we can do the same movement here with the push-up to get that serratus anterior activation. And so for the lower traps, we obviously have a bunch of different options available to us as well. We can either do a prone or a half kneeling Y, and so this is the half kneeling Y. And so we'll just have our hands in a Y position, and we're just going to lift them up and behind us, forming a Y at the top here. And so we're just trying to get activation of that lower trap on the bottom side of the shoulder blade. Once we're able to tolerate it, then we can add a little bit of resistance with the exercise band. And so the movement's exactly the same here. So I'll hold the band here, and I'll just pull into that Y position. And so the big thing here, though, is that we want to make sure that we're trying to keep our core engaged so that we're not extending through that lower back. We want to get most of the movement through the shoulder. So as we're doing this, we want to make sure that we're not going like this, because that's not going to activate the lower trap as much. We want to make sure that when we're actually pulling here, we're just moving through those shoulders instead. And while strengthening the muscles around the shoulder and the shoulder blade are generally helpful, it doesn't necessarily translate to decreasing pain with overhead movements. And so these next two exercises are exercises that I use that challenge the shoulder through those ranges of motion. And the idea is to get your muscles used to going through that range of motion while also decreasing the pain. And an exercise I like is a combination of that push-up with a plus with a downward dog from yoga. And so what we'll do is we'll go back into that push-up position. And so from here, we're going to push our chest away from the ground, which is that push-up with a plus position here. And then we're going to push our hips up towards the ceiling. And so we're getting our arms up into 180 degrees of flexion or so. And so we're just trying to maintain that push away to engage the muscles around the shoulder. And then going into that flexion position. And so if I were to take this position here and just rotate myself, we'd be in that upward position, which is typically where we get pain. So the idea with this is that we're trying to decrease the pain with that overhead position. And the other exercise is a wall slide. So we can obviously do this exercise against a wall, or we can do it in a half kneeling position. It's really whichever one you feel more comfortable with. And so the goal for this exercise, we're going to try to keep our forearms parallel to each other and not let them form an A position like this. And so what we'll do is we'll get our forearms parallel to each other, and then we're going to just lift our arms up overhead, trying to keep them parallel and separated, and then slowly come back down. And so the same thing when we were talking about that Y exercise, we want to make sure that we're not arching through that low back, that all the movement's coming from the shoulder. And then just like the previous exercise, what we're looking for is this to decrease the pain with overhead movements, and that it doesn't actually produce more pain. Thank you for watching this video on subacromial shoulder pain. I hope that you found this information useful. If you did, go ahead and give this video a big thumbs up. It'll help other people that are dealing with this find this video. If you want to see more of my videos, hit the subscribe button over to the side here. Hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos. I'll see you guys in the next video.